All right, friends, it is 11 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. Almost said Thursday. I've been wishing a day away all week, but happy Wednesday. This is the Scaffolding Without Reducing Rigor webinar, so hopefully you're in the right place. My name is Britta McCormick, and I'm the team lead for our curriculum-based professional learning team here at the State Department. I'm in the Office of Instructional Resources and Technology Strategy. Have a couple of my teammates with me here today. We've got Catherine, who's going to be co-piloting for me, so you'll see her name in the chat a bit, dropping some links. And then we also have our newest member of the team, Kristen Siren. So she's here with us today. And they are going to be taking a look, monitoring the chat. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop those in. We have a couple of just, housekeeping items to get started with before we jump in. The first is our disclaimer for the use of artificial intelligence. Just if you have any, co-pilot or AI note takers, anything like that, we will kick those out of our chat. So just make sure that if you have any of those, you turn them off so that they're not in the chat throughout the presentation. This webinar also offers recertification credit under a couple of circumstances. If you'll make sure that you attend the webinar live and be an active participant, remain in attendance for the duration, and then at the end, you're going to get a feedback form. And if you'll complete that feedback form and your request for recertification, you should get an automatic certificate emailed to you with the email address that you use. Last thing is we want to go over just a couple of our virtual norms. If you will make sure that when you're not speaking that you keep your microphone muted so that there's no interference with everybody being able to hear. Whenever possible, please turn your camera on so that we can see you and really engage. Make sure that you're engaging actively through the chat or unmuting and speaking with us. And then obviously make sure we respect all voices and participating in our breakout room activities and discussions. So we will have an opportunity for 2 breakout rooms today. And we would love it if when you're in those breakout rooms, you can turn your camera on and participate in the activities that we have planned for you. So all that to say, I would love to know who you are. If you could take a moment, if you'll drop in the chat your name, where you work, and have you already started back to school? And if so, are you excited? Right. Catherine is going to drop a note catcher for you in the chat. You will need this today, so go ahead and open it. You should be able to make a copy of it. It should force a copy. There are some things that you'll need to read and click on whatnot with that note catcher. So make sure you can open that up and get it readily available. Anytime you see a little circle with a number on it on the screen, that kind of references back to where we are on the note catcher. So just kind of keep us in line and engaged with the work. All right. If there are no questions, we will go ahead and get started. Everybody's got their note catcher. Catherine will drop it a couple more times over the next few minutes as people come in. Oh, Wallace started school back today. Goodness. All right, our purpose for today is to support and implement goals that are rigorous, they're grade level aligned, but we're supporting our students and preserving the intent and expectations of our HQIM. So we're going to start with just a quick read. In your note catcher, box 1, you have a very short snippet of an article. And it is all about why grade level instruction matters. And we're going to do a reading activity called Inspect, Connect, Project. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes or so. It shouldn't take you long to read. But I want you to consider what misconceptions have been clarified or new learning was experienced through the article. How does this learning or information align with your current beliefs or experiences, or how might it be misaligned? And then how might this learning and information impact your instructional practices? So again, that's on your note catcher, the very first thing, very short article. Give you until about 11:10, 11:11, and then we will discuss. All right, it does look like almost everyone is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if somebody wants to unmute or either type in the chat a takeaway that you had from this little short article, this reading. Carrie, yes. So this is a synthesis of a couple of articles. So Catherine, can you make note and I will make sure I can get those to you.
I was just thinking about the importance of, without using our HQIM, we take the chance or run the risk of not giving them access to the grade level text and grade level work. And it may be watered down, it may be less than grade level, and we may not even know it. So yeah. I just kept thinking, why would you not then use your HQIM that you know provides them with the grade level task and the grade level text that they need.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alyssa. And Heather, you're right. Exposing them to those rich materials is going to help them rise. I spent most of my teaching career teaching middle level intervention. And I, at the time, was doing what I thought was right by bringing work that met them where they were. And very rarely did I ever push them to the grade level expectation. I wanted them to be successful. I wanted them to not feel like everything was too hard. And if there's something I would change, is that's absolutely what it would be. If I went back in the classroom, that's what I would change, because they'd get to SC ready and it would be mind blowing, because they spent the whole year being successful at what they could access and never being pushed further. So I think y'all are right on the mark. Um, tier 1 learning at grade level. Yeah. Intervention is a hamster on a wheel without those quality tier 1 instruction. I think you're right. No one goes into education for their students to be unsuccessful or to have a hard time every single day. So that is really the crux of this webinar, is how do we then scaffold and give them the supports they need so that we're exposing them to grade level expectations. We're showing them the bar, expecting them to rise to that bar, but with support that doesn't impact the rigor. If we had a silver bullet for that, I think we could all quit our jobs, but we don't. So we've got little steps along the way. My reflection question for you is, which is the greater risk? That students are challenged by grade level work, or that they're never given grade level work? So just kind of a little stop and think moment, that I think we would all agree that the greater risk is that they're never given the grade level work, right? Oh, Heather, that's great. She said that even teaching, the middle stuff, it's not too easy and not too hard, just the middle. It also doesn't provide the rigor, right? We need to challenge them so that they will meet those expectations that we're hoping for. All right, let's hop into the learning. So a quick agenda. We're going to talk about the definition of scaffolds or scaffolding. We're going to look at scaffolding through a 3-part planning lens, and then you're going to do a little bit of application of learning. So take a moment. I'm not going to read these out loud, but I want you to read these 2 definitions of scaffold or scaffolding, and then in the chat, tell me what is the difference. Absolutely. I've seen a couple of people say intentionality. being proactive. Yep, UDL. Excellent. So you guys are hitting on exactly what I hoped you would, that on the left, we have a noun, right? We have just a definition of scaffold. And the one on the right, instructional scaffolding, is a verb. Holly, I love the way you put it, that it's a practice, right? It's strategic, Carrie, you're right. That, scaffolding is not just a collection of strategies. We can't, host a webinar and say, here's 5 scaffolds that will support every student, because that's not how it works. What's great for one student might not work for another. That scaffolding is a verb and it is an intentional planning process. So that is how we are going to approach scaffolding today throughout this presentation. And so we're going to go through kind of 5 pieces of this definition that I think are particularly important, starting with that word temporary. So you notice that both of these definitions, both the noun and the verb, use the word temporary. So strong scaffolds are designed to be removed as students gain confidence and independence, right? So this could look like giving students a sentence frame early in a unit, but then taking it away eventually. Modeling one example so students can do the next one independently. Going through a class read before releasing responsibility for students to partner read or independent read. Providing manipulatives until students demonstrate conceptual understanding. What it does not look like is using the same scaffold all year, so never removing those sentence stems. Completing the difficult thinking for students, say, give them the answers or do the hard work for them because it's going to take too long for them to figure it out. It is not assuming that students will always need the support. And it is not creating dependency on you as the teacher always being available to assist. Now, the big question that I want you to think about is, well, how do you know when it's time to remove a scaffold? I'd love, if somebody wants to unmute or type in the chat, you're not supposed to leave them there forever. When do we pull back?
Like, we could probably tell from our progress monitoring or formative assessments that the student is showing some progress towards mastery. So you could pull back a scaffold or a layer of a scaffold, right? Yep. And see what they could do with that next more challenging part on their own.
Yeah, I love that. It could be a little bit of a trial and error. Let's say we take a layer or we remove the whole thing and then students are still not successful. Well, then we add a layer back and we continue that until students are ready to do that independently. Very good. All right, the second part of the definition that I think is particularly important and unfortunately is oftentimes overlooked is this idea that they are student specific, that we don't necessarily roll out one scaffold for the entire class. Scaffolds are in response to evidence of what students need, not necessarily assumptions about what they can do, which I think is kind of another thing that kind of hangs over us sometimes of, well, I know, most of these students aren't coming into me at grade level, so I'm just going to give them X, Y, and Z from the beginning. And that can be really detrimental. So it looks like using formative assessments to identify the barriers. Where does the barrier exist? Where do I need to begin intervening? It could look like providing vocabulary supports after you notice misconceptions, offering different supports to different students, which we know is difficult, but that's an important part of that intellectual preparation process when you are digging into your HQIM. And then adjusting supports based on ongoing observation. So as students are becoming more independent, we're removing the scaffolds. As you notice a misconception, we may add a scaffold. It does not look like every student having the exact same scaffold, assuming that struggling readers should automatically receive an easier text. or providing supports based on labels rather than evidence. So a similar question is, what evidence should guide your scaffolding decisions? What are we looking at to decide this student needs sentence stems and this student doesn't?
I think one thing I think about is some of the formative assessments, like was mentioned earlier. We're looking at that student work, but even listening to our conversations that our students are having and providing that time when they're talking and responding, that's going to help us and inform us on who needs what. For example, my son was in first grade last year. He was struggling with the concept. His teacher didn't need to do it for the whole class. She gave him a little starter right there at his desk, personally for him, and then she was able to remove that halfway through the year, and he was back on track.
Absolutely, that's a great example of a teacher who's being intentional and doing it right for that one student who needs it. Absolutely. And Lynette says the qualitative data, that teacher observations, exactly, your scores, accommodations plans, absolutely great starting points. The third aspect of that definition, obviously, is support. That scaffolds support students' thinking, not replace it. So we're not giving them answers. We're not doing the thinking for them. We are prompting them. We're giving them think alouds, graphic organizers, guiding questions, sentence starters, allowing them to discuss with partners. That is an excellent scaffold to get their thinking out through conversation. Perhaps we're giving visual models or providing worked examples, which is a really high effect size strategy as well. What it doesn't look like is completing an organizer for students, summarizing the text before students read, giving them the answers, or removing opportunities to engage with grade level content that they may feel is challenging, just removing it altogether. Guilty again. One thing I'd often take a text that wasn't grade level and I'd pop it in a Lexile changer and lower that Lexile, or either give them a whole nother text in general that was lower, but maybe the same topic, and never really allowing them to grapple with that grade level content or text. So this one doesn't necessarily need a response out loud, but just kind of an internal prompt. Are the scaffolds that you're using or the teachers that you serve using helping students think, or are they thinking for them? And that needs to be a question I think that we ask ourselves every single time we implement a scaffold is, what level of support are we providing, or are we doing the tough work for the students that they really need to be doing? The next piece of that definition that I found important was to maximize access. So the purpose of scaffolding is to remove barriers, not remove learning. So some barriers might include complex vocabulary, unfamiliar context. We don't have that background knowledge that we need to tackle that text. Maybe it's the academic language. Maybe there's multi-step directions. My personal children, we get lost after step one. We got to go back and do it again. Maybe it's just the organization of the text they're reading or the document they're looking at. My team was working on a unit internalization just the other day for some personal professional learning, and just the organization and the formatting of the assessment was hard to follow. We can fix that, right? And still keep the content the same for students to respond to. And then it could be that working memory is a barrier for students, right? And these are just some of many. So barriers are not grade level thinking. It's not the standard or the indicator. It's not the text complexity, and it's not the task itself. Those aren't the barriers, the big things that we need to change, adjust, or move. We need to keep those things standard expectation across the board for our students. And so again, a personal reflection question. Are your scaffolds removing barriers, or are they removing grade level expectations? Because if they're removing the grade level expectation, it's not a scaffold. And then the final piece of the definition I wanted to point out is grade level. So every scaffold should preserve the cognitive demand of the lesson. We are maintaining that cognitive expectation. The goal is to support students in completing the same grade level task, not an easier version, the exact same one. So examples might include, instead of rewriting a grade level text to lower the complexity, which is what I used to do, maybe we chunk the grade level text to reduce the amount of information the student's processing at one time. We stop, we summarize, we synthesize, we move on. Maybe it looks like instead of answering questions for students, maybe we're providing a series of scaffolded questions that guide their thinking. So we don't start with the big question. We ask some smaller questions along the way that are guiding them to that big, answer at the end that we want them to be able to get to. Instead of reducing our writing expectations, perhaps we provide detailed planning support. We give them the organizer. We give them the sentence stems. We give them the support they need until they're able to complete whatever that writing task was together. And so my final reflection question is, do your scaffolds change the learning or change the pathway? Because again, the goal is not to change the learning. As you are working with teachers or you're doing this work yourself, I want you to think about some guiding questions for choosing strong scaffolds. These 5 walk through each of those 5 pieces of the definition. And sorry, I got a little distracted because Akiva, I just saw your message. Yes, I typically put the slide deck on the note catcher and I completely forgot. So I'll make sure we drop a copy in the chat before y'all leave today of this presentation. You're welcome to use it however you want to use it. So the 5 questions: temporary, how will this support a gradual release of responsibility? Student specific, what evidence tells me that this is needed? Support, does this support thinking without replacing it? Maximizing access, what barrier am I removing? And then grade level, does it preserve the cognitive demand? So on your note catcher, box 2, we're going to wrap up this little section with a glow, grow, and go. So which characteristic of this definition, these 5 pieces, do you think you do really well? You would consider it your instructional glow. Which characteristic are you wanting to grow in or develop further? And what's going to be your next step to make that happen? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do a little bit of self-reflection. And while you're doing that, I will get you a copy of this presentation. All right, I'd love to hear from just 1 or 2 people what you are thinking. It could be a glow, a grow, a go, or just a takeaway from that little section.
Well, this is one of our district's focus this year, so I think we have a lot in growing and going that we can go in our district. So I'm excited because we need to grow in a lot of areas, because just like you said, what things you used to do when you were in the classroom, same things I used to do, and we still see that. So I just feel like we have a lot of areas, all of these really to grow in, but I'm excited that we're focusing on that and we're going to get there.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. I love that too. Once you know better, you do better, right? We know better, we do better. Sometimes I see my former students out, gainfully employed, and I think, thank God, thank God they made it despite me, they did it. So know better, do better. And Lynette, be able to better discern how and why scaffolds are being provided. I love that. Love that. Okay, so we're going to look now through a 3-part planning lens that I think maybe will really help your teachers walk through and discern, what are we choosing and why. So I have a quote for you from an article that I have cited for you later, but it says, rather than asking what is a good scaffold for this lesson or how do I scaffold this curriculum, we need to be asking ourselves more targeted questions that get at the nuance of what we need to consider about our content, our students, and our context. And so those are the 3 lenses that we're going to look through as we decide what scaffolds to use. So the 3-part planning lens for instructional scaffolding. We want to attend to the content. What grade level expectations are non-negotiable? It's number 1. Once we've established this is the grade level expectation, then that's the grade level expectation and that's non-negotiable. So any scaffold that we are considering using cannot change that grade level expectation. Next, we want to attend to our students. What evidence suggests supports are needed? Have we gathered evidence, or are we assuming that they won't be able to handle whatever we're giving them? And then finally, attending to the context. So what's already available in your HQIM as a routine or a structure that you can use or leverage to support your students? And so those are the 3 big questions we want to ask. So what I have done is created for you a document that breaks down each of these 3 lenses. So I would like for you to take just a few minutes. This is page 3, to independently look at this document. So on your own, we're going to give you a few minutes, and then we're going to pop you into breakout rooms, give you about 5 minutes to discuss these 3 questions. So what you need to keep in mind is what's challenging your thinking, how has your thinking changed, and how has your thinking or understanding been confirmed. So I'm not prepared to change my mind about this because we're right on track. So those are kind of the 3 big ideas. And again, the document's linked on box 3, but also in the chat. And I will stop talking so you have a few independent minutes to review. All right, guys, Catherine is going to start putting you into breakout rooms. We'll pop in and out to kind of gauge conversation. But again, I want you to discuss your challenged, changed, and confirmed, and each group be prepared to share one significant takeaway. Welcome back. Hello. All right, I would love to hear your key takeaway or something that was just a point of conversation in your rooms. I don't know if you were able to delegate someone who was going to chat, but if somebody wants to just speak out and let us know a takeaway from your group.
So our group talked about how important it was when you're starting Unit 1 that you do look at the student data, because that's all you have to go on at the beginning of the year, right, until you truly get to know them. But at the same time, in your PLCs, helping teachers have that process where they're continually looking at the standards and we know what the rigor should be, not just the content and the skills, but at what rigor should we be teaching each of these things. And then identify the gap between here's where each of my kids is, and it could be different levels, right? And then the standard. And then with that context, which is part 3, how do I close that gap? Well, that's going to be a scaffold or a strategy that I use. And our group talked about how, as practitioners, we've got to be really good about identifying possibly different scaffolds for different students.
Yeah.
And not just one size fits all.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I was in there when y'all were talking about the standards and really knowing standards. I think that when it comes to HQIM, one of the fears is that what about the indicators? What if it's not aligned? But one of the most important things to do when using HQIM is to know your indicators and know what the expectation is for students before you even go in there and begin. So thank you. All right, one more group want to share out.
In our group, we talked about making sure to start with the grade level expectations. And Marissa shared an analogy that she had used in her district about when you go out to dinner, you may get a dish, and some people grab that salt and start salting that dish before they've even tasted it.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, that might be a eye-opening for the teachers in my district. Like, we do need to start with our grade level expectations. Start with your high quality instruction material. Let's not add the salt before we've even tasted what we have in front of us and seen what the kids can do.
I love that analogy, and Marissa, thank you, because I'll probably steal it. I think that's great. Great way to look at that. So hopefully that document is helpful. I did post the article that I adapted it from in the chat, and also linked on that document if you want to read the full article. That we just made kind of a bite-sized chunk that is pretty to look at for you. But we're going to pop into our very last portion of learning today, and that is the application of learning. So I have some scenarios that I want you to discuss. So we are going to put you back in breakout rooms, and each breakout room will have a name. You have either scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, or scenario 4. All of those are linked on your note catcher in box 4, and your group name will show you which scenario you need to open and read. So I want you to read that scenario, reason through the teacher's instructional decisions. There's some discussion questions for you there. And then if somebody in your group will be the recorder, I think I have forced copies, so you won't be able to see each other's responses. So just one person, make sure you're recording, and then be prepared to report back to the larger group. Thumbs up, everybody kind of on board with that? Okay, perfect. So Catherine will go ahead and pop you back into some rooms, and we will jump in and make sure you know which article you're supposed to be reading.
Individual.
Welcome back again. I'm sorry if I cut off conversation. I know there was a lot of really good conversation happening, and we could talk about this all day if we had the time. So thank you. I will ask that a group or two just shares out a very quick summary. You know, what did your teacher do in the scenario, and was it the right thing based on our learning today? Love to hear from 2 people.
Hi, we went. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We did scenario 4. Since we were group 4, we did scenario 4. And I'm just going to go right to what we thought. We thought that answering, well, I'm going to go through those questions real quick. Let me flip back to it real quick. All right. And I'll be fast. All right. Did the teacher remove barriers or remove the thinking? We thought that the teacher removed the thinking in our scenario, where they were trying to grasp something, and automatically when several of the children start complaining, she just went in and fixed it for them and just gave them a graph that was already sort of fixed. And so we thought she took out the thinking part of it, the productive thinking, the productive struggle that they needed to have. Were the supports appropriately provided to the entire class? And she gave it to the entire class, but when it talked about student on that 3 paper, that paper that you told us to look at, she didn't design the support for individual learners. She just did it for the whole class. When some children may not have needed it, they might have grown from the struggle, but she didn't give it that chance. Which characteristics of strong instructional scaffolding are no longer present? Well, that productive struggle. And how well did the teacher attend to the content, students, and the context? Well, for the content, she didn't begin with the grade level goal. She just focused straight on the struggle when they started complaining at the beginning. Students, well, like I said, she didn't design it to support individual learners. And the context, I don't think she anticipated what the struggles could have been. So she didn't want to feel frustrated with all of them saying something to her. So that's all I'm going to say. All right.
Well, thank you. And I did want to just, make sure you realize that you all can access all 4 scenarios. So if you wanted to redo this activity with teachers, or you want to look at the other scenarios, those are there for you on your note catcher. So thank you, Laura, for sharing that. So for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Just to revisit our purpose, we hope that we were able to meet the goals of this, to support you in implementing instructional scaffolds that are providing access to the grade level learning and preserving the intent and expectations of your HQIM. So just to sum it up, we have a complex Venn diagram here that really just shows the intersection of our HQIM, rigor, and scaffolding. So if we think just about HQIM, they're standards aligned, they're intentionally sequenced, they're built for complexity and depth. If we move over to rigor, that's deep thinking and reasoning with developmentally appropriate challenges, and it provides equitable access for all students. And then scaffolding are those temporary supports that maintain grade level expectations while building independence. We start intersecting these, and we can see that HQIM includes scaffolding that helps make grade level content accessible, and it supports diverse learners without lowering the expectations. If we look at the intersection of HQIM and rigor, we know that our HQIM is rigorous, that there are tasks aligned to the standards that have embedded complexity, and the instruction is going to push beyond surface level recall. And then our final intersection of scaffolding and rigor, the scaffolds need to help maintain the rigor while gradually releasing students toward independence so that all students are engaging in challenging work. And our goal really is to hit the middle of this Venn diagram, the intersection of all 3, where we're providing grade level tier 1 instruction that's developmentally appropriate, that is the right cognitive demand for all of our students, and really promotes meaningful learning that builds knowledge and skills. And so my final reflection for you as we wrap up today is, what are you going to do to ensure that your future planning, or the planning of the teachers you support, lands in the center of this Venn diagram? Because that's really where we want all of our teaching and learning to be.